Some people do not panic when love feels chaotic. They panic when it finally starts to feel steady. They can survive mixed signals, distance, and uncertainty for a long time. But the moment love becomes clear, something inside them starts stepping backward. That is what makes it so hard to explain. The connection improved, and somehow that improvement became the trigger. Love starts feeling real, and real love is harder to control than imagined love. But once someone becomes consistent, present, and emotionally available, the stakes change. Now your heart has something solid enough to lose. That is when some people pull back, not because they stopped caring, but because they started caring in a way that feels dangerous. They may still think about the person all day. They may still crave the text, the voice, the warmth. But their body starts reading safety as exposure. Their nervous system treats closeness like a cliff edge. This is one of the strangest parts of adult intimacy. Security can feel more threatening than instability. Instability is painful but familiar. Security is beautiful but unfamiliar. And unfamiliar does not always feel safe at first. Sometimes it feels like walking into a room with no exits. They stop saying quite as much. They hold back just enough to regain some internal distance. It can look like coldness, but a lot of the time it is fear wearing a calm face. Because when love starts feeling secure, a hidden question wakes up. What happens if I really lean in and this changes later? That question can live under everything. Under the delayed reply, the sudden mood shift, the strange emotional hesitation after closeness. People often think fear of love looks like avoiding relationships. Sometimes it does. But sometimes fear of love looks like entering love, enjoying it, and then retreating the moment it begins to feel dependable. That pattern usually does not come from nowhere. It comes from emotional memory. Maybe care was given, but not steadily. Maybe warmth existed, but it could disappear without warning. Maybe closeness felt good one day and risky the next. Maybe being open led to disappointment, embarrassment, or being left alone with too much feeling. So now, consistency does not just feel comforting. It also activates old anticipation. Part of the mind says, this is what you wanted. Another part says, this is exactly when you could get hurt. This is why someone can seem fully invested and suddenly hard to read. The feelings did not vanish. The fear simply caught up to the feelings. And once it did, self-protection moved to the front. You see it after someone says, I'm here, in a way that sounds believable. That is often the exact moment the retreat begins. Because now the relationship is no longer fantasy. It is becoming attachment. And attachment asks more of a person than attraction does. It asks for dependence, trust, and emotional visibility. They fear needing. They fear how much someone could affect them once they matter. So instead of saying, this is getting important and that scares me, they create space. Distance becomes their way of lowering the emotional volume. They may tell themselves they are just trying to stay balanced. They may call it pacing themselves or protecting their peace. Sometimes that is partly true, but sometimes peace is not what is happening. Sometimes it is panic, just quieter than people expect panic to look. It is anxiety in a composed outfit. A loving question feels harder to answer than it should. A sweet plan for next week feels strangely heavy. Consistency means continuation. Continuation means deeper attachment. Deeper attachment means the possibility of deeper pain. So the body says, slow this down before it owns too much of you. That is why pulling back can happen right after things start going well. Safety increases, and with it, vulnerability. To someone who learned to associate vulnerability with pain, that does not feel relaxing. It feels like standing unarmored in open air. They still show up, just with a little less softness. They are present enough to not fully lose the bond, but distant enough to feel less exposed. The other feels the fear, but does not know how to explain it without sounding irrational. So the relationship enters a fog. The strange thing is that the pulling back may happen because the person finally feels something trustworthy. That is what makes the pattern so easy to misread. It can look like disinterest, but underneath it is often the terror of how much interest now exists. Think about someone who has spent years adapting to emotionally inconsistent love. They learn to stay alert, not relaxed. They learn to read tone changes, timing, and subtle distance. They became fluent in emotional weather. Then they meet someone steady. No games, no vanishing, no performance. They wait for the shift. They wait for the coldness, the boredom, the drop in effort. When it does not come, the nervous system does not always settle, Sometimes it becomes even more watchful. Because now there is more to lose. The relationship has become credible. And credible love can be terrifying to people who only know how to prepare for loss. They do not know where to place all that hope. So they start scanning themselves. Am I getting too attached, too available, too hopeful, too easy to hurt? Not because they want less closeness, because they want less risk. This is also why some people seem warm in the early stage, then cooler once you become consistent. Early closeness feels optional. Later closeness feels binding, and binding stirs old fear fast. That resentment matters. It is not really about you. It is often about the uncomfortable fact that your steadiness is becoming emotionally important, and importance can feel like a loss of control. For someone who survived by staying self-contained, being deeply affected by another person can feel humiliating. Even when the relationship is healthy, they may hate how much your silence affects them. They may hate how much your reassurance calms them. Not because reassurance is weak, because needing it confronts a very old fear. The fear is not only, what if this person leaves? It is also, what if I become the version of myself who can be hurt that much again? So the person starts pulling back before the bond gets deeper. It feels preventive. If they create distance first, they do not have to discover what full closeness would cost later. At least that is what the protective part believes. But this protection has a price. It interrupts the exact safety they were beginning to receive. The other person starts feeling shut out. They begin wondering if they imagined the connection. And now the guarded person feels even less safe, because the distance they created starts producing the very instability they feared. A softer voice disappears. A vulnerable detail goes unsaid. A reassuring moment gets deflected with humor or casualness. A needed conversation gets postponed until the warmth cools. So they blame chemistry, timing, stress, or a vague sense that something is off. Sometimes what feels off is not the relationship. Sometimes what feels off is the amount of safety entering a system built around caution. Safety can feel unnatural before it feels nourishing. That does not mean the pullback should be romanticized. It hurts people. It can make a loving partner feel punished for being consistent. It can make connection feel unstable when it was becoming solid. Others withdraw because love is finally landing. Those are very different realities. A steady partner does not just offer comfort. They expose how unfamiliar comfort has been. That can stir sadness, suspicion, tenderness, and fear all at once. The heart feels held, and the defenses feel unemployed. And defenses do not retire quietly. They start looking for reasons to stay relevant. They whisper that things are moving too fast, even when the pace is normal. They whisper that distance is wisdom, even when distance is fear. They whisper that staying slightly detached is maturity, but detachment is not always discernment. Sometimes it is just old pain trying to stay in charge. Sometimes it is a scared part translating vulnerability into caution. You can see this in the person who gets colder right after being deeply seen. They share something real, feel close, then disappear a little. The closeness itself becomes the trigger. Being understood touched a place that is not used to being touched gently. You can see it in the person who wants commitment, then feels trapped by the safety of commitment. Nothing is wrong, but their chest still tightens. You can see it in the person who finally gets reassurance, then becomes embarrassed for needing it. They receive the comfort and instantly pull away from the fact that they wanted it. What they often need in those moments is not more pressure. It is language. Language interrupts the silent spiral. Language turns confusing distance into something that can actually be understood. That might sound like, I notice I pull back when things start feeling real. It might sound like, when love feels steady, I get scared of how much I need it. That kind of honesty does not erase fear, but it stops fear from secretly running the relationship. Because unspoken fear becomes behavior. Spoken fear has at least a chance to become intimacy. This is the mature turn in the pattern, not never feeling the urge to retreat, but noticing what the retreat is trying to protect. Is it protecting peace or protecting distance? Is it honoring intuition or avoiding exposure? Those are not the same thing, and many people confuse them because fear can sound incredibly reasonable inside the mind. It says, stay grounded, but sometimes staying grounded is different from staying guarded. Being grounded means staying present with reality. Being guarded means controlling reality before it can reach you. That distinction changes everything. The other creates distance with explanations. One lets love breathe. The other keeps love on probation. And love can feel that. You can care deeply about someone and still keep them outside your inner world. You can enjoy closeness and still refuse to rest in it. That is often what pulling back during security really is. It is not absence of feeling. It is feeling with the emergency lights still on. It is tenderness that does not trust itself to stay soft. The person may even believe they are protecting the relationship by slowing down. Sometimes they are only protecting themselves from the emotional reality of being loved. For some people, that feels less like romance and more like surrender. Not because surrender is bad, but because they were taught that needing someone puts them at risk. So they keep one hand on the exit, even while asking for closeness with the other. This is where relationships start feeling lonely from the inside. There is affection, but not full arrival. There is care, but also a quiet refusal to be fully met. The person is in the relationship, yet still partly hiding from it. And the saddest part is that many of them ache for exactly what they are resisting. They want to exhale inside love. They want to stop monitoring every shift. They want steadiness without the panic that steadiness can trigger. What helps is honest recognition. The pullback is not random. It often begins at the exact point where love stops being abstract and starts becoming emotionally reliable. That is the moment the old self-protection system says we need more distance. But distance is not always the truth. Sometimes the truth is simply, this matters to me more than I know how to carry. That sentence is vulnerable. It is also far more intimate than a week of confused silence. Because the real opposite of fear is not fearlessness, it is honesty. Honesty lets another person meet you where the fear actually lives. It gives secure love something real to respond to. And if this pattern feels familiar, it does not mean you're broken or incapable of love. It may mean you learn to survive connection before you learn to trust it. Not by forcing yourself to feel safe on command. Not by pretending you are more relaxed than you are. But by noticing the moment security starts feeling threatening. By naming the instinct to create space before the space starts speaking for you. Because when you do not name it, the other person only feels the wall. They do not see the fear behind it. And many relationships suffer not from lack of love, but from love being filtered through old alarms. The feeling is real. The safety just has trouble getting in. That is a very different problem. So the next time you feel yourself pulling back right when things start feeling secure, pause before calling it a sign. Ask what the security is waking up. Ask whether you are sensing danger or sensing importance. Ask whether the urge to distance is wisdom or just fear of being changed by care. Because sometimes the most honest thing you can say is not, I need space. Sometimes it is, I am scared because this feels safe. And for people who have spent years bracing inside relationships, that sentence can be the beginning of a completely different kind of love. One where security no longer feels like the moment to leave. One where being cared for does not immediately trigger escape. One where pulling back is no longer the price of finally being able to stay.